watching Bitcoin be the organizing principle for real huge institutions, the biggest Japanese VC fund, the biggest stablecoin issuer, and a real Wall Street player, to me shows that Bitcoin really is that life raft, really is exactly what we've all been saying for years, because these guys are putting their money where their mouth is and they're treating Bitcoin in this way.
Permissionless, the crypto industry's leading developer conference, is coming to Brooklyn this June 24th to the 26th, and this time Bitcoin is showing up in a big way. That's right, with confidence in Ethereum and Solana on the decline, interest in Bitcoin development is riding high, and yet the way forward for many builders remains unclear. Layer 2s, meta protocols, soft fork upgrades. We'll be talking about the future of Bitcoin and how and if it needs to change. Of course, tickets are going fast. You can get them today at blockworks.co. We'll see you there. Hey everybody, this episode of Supply Shock is powered by Core. You're going to hear a lot more about them later in this episode, but first, a word from our sponsors.
Hold Bitcoin and earn yield. Staking Bitcoin with Core, the leading Bitcoin scaling solution, earns real yield while keeping your Bitcoin right where it is. No lending, no bridging, no wrapped assets. Just lock your Bitcoin using Bitcoin native time locks, help secure the Core network, and earn liquid Core tokens. Your Bitcoin never leaves your wallet. Still your keys, still your coins, now your yield. Ready to put your BTC to work and earn max yields? Start staking at stake.coredao.org/blockworks.
Hey everybody, Pete Rizzo, the Bitcoin historian here. On today's episode of Supply Shock, we're bringing on one of our favorite regular commentators. I'm talking about Nolan Bowerly from Roxham TV to dive deep into some massive news. So in place of our normal roundup where we take a bunch of news from the week that was and digest it, we're going to be diving deep into what we think is the biggest news of the week. Obviously, the idea that SoftBank, Tether, Cantor Fitzgerald, one of the largest financial institutions on Wall Street, are all backing a new Bitcoin Treasury company called 21 that will be helmed by none other than Jack Mallers, the CEO of Strike, famous for orange pilling the nation of El Salvador, and certified Bitcoin legend. You can find my thread about his history on my Twitter account at Pete_Rizzo. Let's get into the details. Nolan, earth-shattering stuff broke late last night. Financial Times coming out saying that Cantor Fitzgerald was essentially bankrolling a new startup that would compete with MicroStrategy, that would accumulate Bitcoin massively. This idea that there would be another or could be another MicroStrategy, obviously on the face, a big deal. Saying it'll accumulate as much as $3 billion worth of Bitcoin. We know now they will have 40,000 Bitcoin to start, so they will be the third largest treasury company. Let's just get into your fast reaction before we dive into the details here. A second MicroStrategy.
It's a MicroStrategy clone for sure. It looks like a MicroStrategy clone funded by SoftBank and the Tether money. So with a Wall Street component, and that's the Cantor Fitzgerald part. Everyone knows, of course, Howard Lutnick, a speaker at Bitcoin 2024, current Secretary of Commerce. So it puts all these people in place, Japanese major venture capitalists with some tech bros from people that we all recognize, the Jack Mallers, and then, of course,
well, for me, the Jack Mallers piece was the thing that really sealed it. Of course,
let's get to that. Let's hold off on the Jack Mallers part because there's a lot to unpack. That is the biggest part. You're right, but I don't want to get right into that. I think there's a few pieces before we get into the tech part that's important. But indeed, this MicroStrategy clone part, for me, first up, the Japan part. I think we got to talk about the Japanese component of this, SoftBank being involved. And because this brings, we've seen Lutnick with the trade wars. We've seen the market reaction to Liberation Day, Trump's trade war that we started last week in America with all these other countries. It was an extreme case. We saw contagion hit all parts of Wall Street. How many people in the past 2 weeks have said something broke, something broke? And now you see Japan. Of course, we saw a trade deal coming out with America and Japan about to be finalized. But Masahiro Son, who's involved in this, is sort of one of the great financial pumpers of all time. This guy was behind WeWork. If everyone in America remembers WeWork, he was writing checks like crazy to keep them solvent over the years. What I think is very interesting, though, enter this into that whole trade war talk. Of course, we saw Cantor Fitzgerald and Lutnick. He's a big a hawk when it comes to this trade war. He's one of the people that say is giving bad advice to President Trump. So combine the trade war, the Japanese element, and the stable coins. And suddenly it's not just a MicroStrategy clone. This looks like a ship designed to chart through the waters of change that have been announced by the Trump administration the past few days. This looks purpose-built to survive a reorganization of global finance. Already Bitcoin is leading in that narrative. Of course, Bitcoin is leading in that narrative. But to see these huge pieces organize themselves around Bitcoin in order to traverse this market fluctuation, huge market change, the biggest market change people have said we've seen in 80 years since Bretton Woods or the end of the gold standard. So watching Bitcoin be the organizing principle for real huge institutions, the biggest Japanese VC fund, the biggest stablecoin issuer, and a real Wall Street player, to me shows that Bitcoin really is that life raft, really is exactly what we've all been saying for years, because these guys are putting their money where their mouth is and they're treating Bitcoin in this way. And I find that to be the most interesting part of the story.
Yeah, I would start with the players, right? If you're going to put together a competitor to Strategy, Michael Saylor's company has amassed over 500,000 Bitcoin by some reports, on track over the next 5 years to maybe even hit 1 million. Maybe it'll land around 800,000 Bitcoin. I mean, you'd certainly start with these people. SoftBank, I'm not as familiar, so appreciate the context there. But Tether, the behemoth of the stablecoin space, you're talking about one of the largest buyers of U.S. Treasuries that's ever existed, kind of coming bootstrapping from nothing over the last 10 years. This is a company that seems to be diversifying and buying shares of soccer teams and alternative fuel investment companies, like really putting that money to work in creative ways. Obviously, huge to see them and everything that's, I think the future is bright for Tether. We've talked about that on this program. But last but not least, I would say Jack Mallers, right? So the idea that you would have a front man for the band, who carries sway in the Bitcoin community, who's deep in the technology, right? Somebody who, started Strike, which was one of the fastest growing startups of the last cycle. Obviously, we'll kind of return to that. And I think that's the big hanging chad here, to use a dated expression of what is the future of that company. But obviously for somebody who's in the market, right, you think about, okay, you're going to start a MicroStrategy competitor. Well, I can just buy Strategy, right? I can just buy Strategy as an ETF. I can buy one of these Misty type dividend products or all those sorts of things, right? Or I could buy one of the other 15, 20 companies on the market, right? Whether that's Assembler Scientific or, a Cooler or something more exotic, in the foreign markets. If you're going to put a US based strategy competitor together, you got to build a super band. And with Lutnick as well coming in, from the kind of institutional and really just, this wouldn't be Howard Lutnick himself, but his son who's running the company, right? It just, you're putting a tremendous amount of Wall Street capital together. So it feels like, if something is going to be real, first, I never thought we'd see a strategy competitor of this size. So this seems to signal that Wall Street might want that, right? There's a market there, but if you're gonna do it, this is who you put together, right? So I think maybe I would start there as saying, like, an impossible task, impossible mission, mission impossible.
No, well, in this case, I see obvious advantages. MicroStrategy, people say, oh, it's a company, it has cash flows. It's kind of exhausted those cash flows that MicroStrategy generates to buy Bitcoin. That was sort of the 2020 version of MicroStrategy. Right now, it really is a Bitcoin holding company for all intents and purposes. I don't want to diminish what's going on in MicroStrategy. I'm not trying to ignore it. But that's why they're issuing all these new debt instruments and bonds to go out and buy the Bitcoin, because their cash flow is tapped out. It's already accounted for. They've already bought the Bitcoin with it. When you look at what's going on with these folks, these aren't cash flow businesses, but SoftBank in the Japanese sense has access to cash that isn't just this, go to your central bank and get cash and get it at a low interest rate and then go buy Bitcoin with that. It isn't necessarily debt they're going to have to use. Look at Tether. Tether's cash flow is one of the best and most interesting cash flow machines in the world. I mean, they literally print
They are a money printer.
They are an actual money printer.
Let's get into I want to read some of the specifics. Well, let's read and react here. So we're gonna read April 23rd. SoftBank, Tether, and Jack Mallers launched 21, a Bitcoin native company, through a business combination with Cantor Equity Partners. So I'll go line by line. We'll kind of talk about what were our reactions. But backed by Tether and Soft Group, 21 is expected to launch with over 42,000 Bitcoin and a mission to maximize Bitcoin ownership per share. So obviously the big thing there, the number 42,000 puts them immediately into the top 3 in terms of companies with the most Bitcoin on the balance sheet. Nothing wrong with that number. But, co-founder Jack Mallers will lead 21 as CEO. 21 is expected to offer investors a singular vehicle for Bitcoin exposure. I think that's what that underscores what you were saying, Nolan, where this is purpose designed, pro Bitcoin advocacy and Bitcoin focused content and media. Interesting, with plans to explore future expansion into Bitcoin native financial products. I guess we'll come back to content and media. That's interesting. Thoughts? Anything to pick apart?
Yeah,
there?
well, let's go with the Jack Mallers now. I would like to bring that up a bit, because what's interesting here is you look at this and it becomes, I just mentioned everything about the trade war. And trade war, of course, seems like a Wall Street battle, right? We saw all of these groups in the last 2 weeks fighting this trade war. And here's from Arthur Hayes this morning when he wrote his piece on Japan, and this is from the desk of Arthur Hayes, his great piece. Arthur Hayes, one of the best writers in the business, if you don't know. This is called Ski Cut, and there's a line in it. He says, this is quite the bullish setup, talking about the markets are doing right now, Bitcoin, trade war, everything, Japan. And he says, they know high tariffs and Chimerica divorce are bad for stock prices. But here's the important part. He's mind reading the way Wall Street already talks about Bitcoin. This is already within the decoupling we've seen with Bitcoin and the normie markets the past few weeks, which has been a very interesting story in Bitcoin, watching markets go down and Bitcoin go up. And what he says is that they believe that Bitcoin is just a high beta version of the NASDAQ 100. And so what he's saying here is that the market still thinks of Bitcoin as this tech stock. It still thinks of it as a tech stock, even though it is this de-risk platform to get away from sovereign mistakes and sovereign trouble. So what I find really interesting is you put Jack Mallers there, you still get, he's a tech CEO. He's not a Wall Street CEO. It has nothing to do with Wall Street. He's from Chicago, I guess, and he knows how to trade because it's a trading town. He comes from a trading background.
His family comes from a long lineage of traders.
You got it. But watching this thing get balanced in the company, I think holds a lot of promise and a lot of potential. Having a tech guy there with the Wall Street chops already accounted for means they can get right involved in this whole topic about what Bitcoin is to Wall Street, because it's changing, the decoupling argument that's there. So now you've got this tech bro that's going to be able to have Wall Street conversations. It's very strange to have found someone with that skill set and put him in charge. Very powerful for pushing the Bitcoin narrative, because you're not getting the pure Wall Street version. You're not getting the pure tech version. You're getting the all-encompassing change the world narrative from Jack. And this company going behind them is a big message.
A tweet from Sam Callahan here, formerly of Swan, a great industry analyst. He says, a Bitcoin treasury company with Cantor's institutional Rolodex and capital markets expertise, Tether's profitability and technological expertise, SoftBank's huge war chest and portfolio of companies, Jack Mallers' energy and leadership, a serious player, just entered the fray. I think that was a good summary of the reaction.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, SoftBank in Japan got its start really as like a mobile phone and internet provider. They're kind of an AT&T of Japan. They are now, one of the things that meant was this Masayoshi Son. We'll talk about him a little more in a second as well. Masayoshi Son is sort of the celebrity, wealthy Japanese person. If you remember, he's the guy who came to the White House.
He's like the Jack Ma of Japan in some ways, right? Is that a
Jack Ma? No, I would put him more. So he's more famous for all kinds of allocations and investing in many things and being a general futurist. So I wouldn't put him as like a builder of one company. He builds companies, but he's, in the American sense, who would I equate him to? He's more of a he's more of a high-end venture capitalist that can move huge amounts of money. So he can get great terms from the Bank of Japan. He did the SoftBank Vision Fund, for example, which was like at the time, 10 years ago, it was $100 billion fund. And the whole world was like, oh my God, he spent it within months, right? This guy is a complete nutbag when it comes to this stuff. Here's a quote that we got from our good friend Junian Wong. Junian Wong shared this today. And because Junian Wong, a Masayoshi Son fan, and Junian Wong, of course, an old CoinDesk guy, a former a Quartz journalist. And he got this quote, and it's called, "You are not crazy enough," and I'll read it. This is Masayoshi Son talking to Adam Neumann, the, of course, famous founder of WeWork. And he says, Masa turns to me and asks, in a fight, who wins, the smart guy or the crazy guy? Neumann said in an interview with Forbes in 2017. I said, the crazy guy, the crazy guy. And he looks at me and says, you are correct, but you're not crazy enough. And so you've got this guy telling Adam Neumann, you got to be crazier. You got to be more nuts. And for having this guy come into Bitcoin, you know, I made a prediction with you on Inauguration Day. I said Donald Trump was going to win the Max Kaiser Employee of the Month, the Bitcoin Employee of the Month award. I'm predicting now that Masahiro Son, and he did win it. He did win it. Trump turned around. Max Kaiser gave it to him this month for announcing the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve. Masahiro Son, one of the great financial pumpers in the history of Wall Street. So that's why he's not really like a Jack Ma or anything like that. He didn't build SoftBank. He has nothing to do with building it. This is a guy who has been taking the balance sheet from the Bank of Japan, the free money, the 0% interest, and peppering it all around the world. And now him getting in Bitcoin, to me, says we've got one of indeed the great financial market manipulators, pumpers, whatever you want to call it. Someone who's out there telling Adam Newman, you're not crazy enough. This is the perfect guy to come into Bitcoin at the perfect time.
Earn real yield on your Bitcoin by simply holding it. Trustless Bitcoin staking with Core means no lending, no bridging, no wrapping, no swapping, no new trust assumptions. Simply lock up your Bitcoin on the Bitcoin blockchain, help elect validators to secure Core, and earn your share of Core token rewards. This isn't a promise or point system. This is real, liquid, and live yield, fueled by activity on the largest Bitcoin DeFi platform. And to earn even more, multiply your rewards tenfold by dual staking Bitcoin and Core tokens, meaning your Core token rewards become the key to unlocking even greater yield. Start earning Core and put just 1% of your BTC to work. Start staking at stake.coredao.org/blockworks. For the past decade, Ledger has been the global leader in digital asset security, trusted to secure more than 20% of the world's crypto assets. Celebrating 10 years of innovation, Ledger is making digital ownership more secure and accessible with their latest products, Ledger Stacks and Ledger Flex. These wallets feature the world's first secure touchscreens, simplifying your digital transactions while ensuring uncompromising security through Ledger's secure chip and proprietary OS. Plus, with the Ledger Security Key app, you can say goodbye to traditional passwords and step up your digital protection. Ready to protect your assets? Choose the most trusted name in hardware wallets, Ledger, and take control of your digital security today at ledger.com.
Well, let's unpack a little bit more of the specifics here. We'll go back to the press release. So we've got 21 Capital Inc., that's the formal name of the company. A newly formed entity today announced it has entered into a definitive agreement for business combination with Cantor Equity Partners, CEP, the business combination, a special purpose acquisition company, SPAC, sponsored by an affiliate of Cantor Fitzgerald, a leading global financial service and real estate holding company. So a lot of words, but they're going to be a public company. That's, I think, the headline there. At closing of the business combination, 21 will be majority owned by Tether, co-founder of 21 and one of the largest stablecoin issuers, and Bitfinex, with a significant minority ownership by SoftBank. So here we have a clarification of the relationship. Tether, the more significant of the two partners, and so that's what we're learning there. 21 and CEP have also entered into subscription agreements with investors to raise at closing $585 million of total additional capital, consisting of, talks about convertible notes, pipe financing, but basically $1 billion. So that is what that says. Net proceeds from these offerings will close. 21 expects to launch with more than 42,000 Bitcoin, which makes it the third largest Bitcoin treasury in the world as of today. This is the confusing part, because it's unclear to me as this is written is whether they actually own the Bitcoin now, right? And I think the wording here is very interesting, because they're talking about to raise, right? This would be indicative of this happening in the future. And then it says 21 expects to launch with more than 42,000 Bitcoin, which would make it the third largest Bitcoin treasury in the world. And so I would argue, if you're going to go out and buy 40,000 Bitcoin, this is pretty significant. Like this is
they're probably going to do. If you remember how Michael Saylor first entered Bitcoin, he used the futures market. He used the Chicago exchange facility, the derivatives that are there. That's how you can get in at these big portions. That's how you get in at these big numbers. So I imagine they're starting to take positions on that market, but under what entity, who's bound to it, I don't know. But I think they can go out and say what they're saying.
I think the headline here is the market knows that someone's out there now buying 40,000 Bitcoin. And of course, they'll have to get it from individual hodlers or companies. So it'll be interesting to watch the price pressure there. Here we get into the meat of 21's vision. 21 is built to accumulate Bitcoin and grow ownership per share, not just track it. As part of its launch, 21 will introduce two key performance metrics to reflect its Bitcoin-denominated capital structure: Bitcoin per share, amount of Bitcoin each fully diluted share represents. I think that's become pretty standard at this point. And Bitcoin return rate, a rate at which BPS grows over time, denominating the company's performance on Bitcoin. Think both pretty common, usually by Metaplan and MicroStrategy and others. Here we get into the Jack Mallers piece, talking about his work with Strike. And this is really the question of what's the future of Strike. Strike, a beloved company, raised hundreds of millions of dollars in its own right. I think the question here is Jack Mallers doing a Jack Dorsey? Is he now going to run two companies simultaneously, or is he stepping away from Strike? If so, I think that would indicate that, what a lot of us in the industry have suspected, which is that Strike was unable to find a revenue model for, Bitcoin payments at scale, and is maybe pivoting something else. But I don't know. That might be reading too much into this. What do you think, Nolan?
Yeah, well, I think if they're bringing on a tech CEO, it's not just for cheerleading, even though he's very good at it. I think there's probably some amount of tech they're going to have to leverage to make this thing functional and operate. Who knows exactly what it's going to be? It could be something as similar or as simple as being able to withdraw your Bitcoin per share to create some differentiated product with what else is out there with MicroStrategy. Perhaps, I'm just guessing. I have no indication that that's true.
Well, with wallet company and exchange, right? They do have an exchange piece, but they're primarily trying to facilitate payments with POS integrations and things like that, right? Jack and the Bitcoin 2022 coming out and announcing all these kind of store integrations that never quite came to fruition. So it does seem like the payments first kind of 2021, 2022 era of Strike, that company, was too early, I think, at this point. It's fair to say, no?
Well, yeah. I think you're getting a lot of that discussion around Lightning, what it can actually be used for. You're starting to get a lot of honest conversations. Bitcoiners, like everyone, right? You've got a confirmation bias. No one wants to admit if something isn't working exactly as you'd intended. But we've seen Lightning go over this over a few years, try to find its niche. I haven't given up on Lightning, but it's certainly not exactly what everyone thought it could be.
Well, I think there are a lot of market commentators who, suspected that it would become a back-end channel for larger businesses and maybe be sort of a network of banks on the back end rather than a consumer-focused payments structure. But certainly, the technology was developed and is still in use, and it is still useful, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's just not it's not maybe the tool that everyone thought with the Shivas wallet, for example, the tool that would put Bitcoin in everyone's pocket. That's not exactly how it turned out. And maybe one day, who knows? But when I see these folks getting together in this way, it can't just be in my mind, maybe, but it can't just be in my mind, the leveraging of Jack for just the marketing purposes, just the leadership purposes. I think there is going to be some tech aspect to it here. And again, Tether, a great tech company. People forget it's a fantastic product. They invented stable coins. Remember that? It's not just that.
Bill Potter, inventor of the most widely used cryptocurrency.
You got it. And so they, and remember why they invented it. They got shut off from banking. They were forced into this. It wasn't even like they had a bright idea. Bitfinex was cut off after their hack and had to go into these different avenues and had to develop technology in order to.
I don't think that timeline's quite right, because the stablecoin was invented before. They were really using it for overnight settlements and things like that, because they didn't have access to a bank and then kept losing their banking partners. But yeah, point taken. All right, let's get more into the quote from Mallers here. "Markets need reliable money to measure value and allocate capital efficiently," said Jack Mallers, co-founder and CEO of 21, so now founder here. "We believe that Bitcoin is the answer, and 21 is how we bring that answer to public markets. Our mission is simple: to become the most successful company in Bitcoin, the most valuable financial opportunity of our time. We're not here to beat the market. We're here to build a new one, a public stock built by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners." A lot of fluff there, but Jack knows how to turn a phrase.
No, but it's a powerful message. It's what we're founded on over at Roxham, having markets measured by Bitcoin, having money that can measure the market. I mean, that's why we denominate everything at Roxham in Bitcoin. We really think it is a measuring stick for everything in the world. It's the only reliable measuring stick for markets. That's why you end up with these markets that don't make any sense, because you can go to SoftBank and you can get a $100 billion fund and just go blow it on WeWork. And then if that doesn't work out, you can get another $100 billion fund. When people ask what can Bitcoin solve, capital allocation is one of the most important problems we have. Throwing money at stupid ideas all the time because we have this broken system. And them coming out and talking about this. This is like Wall Street going on a health kick. This is like Wall Street turning into a creatine eating, weightlifting carnivore before our eyes. And instead of a alcohol swilling, fast food eating monster, we've got some actual discipline here, and we've got some people that are looking to create those feedback loops. So it is fluff. I don't think that's why he's necessarily here. Having a Bitcoin worldview install itself in Wall Street is exactly what that market needs right now, because they can't think past next week. They're so frightened. They can't think past what Trump is about to tweet. I mean, imagine you've got that anxiety working its way through the system, and they're gonna have a heart attack. They're gonna have a brain aneurysm pretty soon over on Wall Street. So when you get Jack Mallers coming out and saying that, you're starting to understand why it is we're going to win, why it is we're going to be able to traverse this. We've been anticipating this trade war type meltdown of global financial markets for a long time. So it wasn't a surprise to us last week. And having these guys come out with this week, I think tying this to the trade war, tying this to Japanese-American relations, I think is a very powerful message.
So we got a little bit more to get into here. So let's dive in. 21 is structured to be a day one Bitcoin native company that will strategically allocate capital to increase Bitcoin per share. 21 intends to develop a corporate architecture capable of supporting financial products built with and on Bitcoin. Interesting. This includes native lending models, capital market instruments, and future innovations that will replace legacy financial tools with Bitcoin-aligned alternatives. As a pro-Bitcoin advocate, 21 plans to produce original Bitcoin-focused content and media. This pure play approach will offer investors access to a public company that combines Bitcoin exposure with an operating business building Bitcoin native projects and services. Interesting stuff there. I mean, were you getting a feeling that there's anything specific that's
that's what I hadn't read this part before until you just brought it up, but that's the tech part right there. That's why Jack Mallers is running it. These are products. This looks like they're asking for functional Bitcoin, repo markets, functional Bitcoin technology that can actually
there was another interesting kind of leak today from I'll pull up the slide. So this was from Bitcoin News. I don't know where they sourced this, but essentially this was a slide deck. So Jack Mallers led 21 positioning themselves as a superior vehicle to master. And here's some of the details here, right? So they're kind of
this is probably from the subscription that they were sending out to raise that money. When you mentioned there was the
right,
that was probably the deck.
So it says master size poses questions about potential diminishing returns as it continues to purchase Bitcoin. So this is something you were hinting at, Nolan. With 500,000 Bitcoin, master must purchase larger quantities to increase Bitcoin per share, reducing the per dollar impact of future capital deployments. 21 will launch with 42,000 Bitcoin and the potential for a more capital efficient growth trajectory.
Yeah, what they mean there is that when MicroStrategy, like I mentioned earlier, when MicroStrategy ran out of its normal cash flow from the MicroStrategy business and couldn't buy Bitcoin with that, they got into this debt market. The problem with that is that when Bitcoin price is up, they have good terms. They can go borrow, they can raise money, they can buy more Bitcoin, but they can only buy expensive Bitcoin for that reason. They can't buy the cheap Bitcoin anymore, because the way the stock trades relative to Bitcoin now is that it gets the premium that's put on when the markets are hot, but it gets the opposite when the market is down. So it goes below the trading price with Bitcoin, the equivalent.
So that's why you see kind of a flurry of activity with Q4. MicroStrategy was able to kind of accumulate a lot within a very short time.
Exactly. So the way they've positioned themselves now, MicroStrategy, they can only buy the expensive Bitcoin. The system won't give them terms even though it makes no sense, right? That's just the craziness of fiat. They know what he's doing. But if Bitcoin's down, suddenly the amount of money he can borrow and on the terms he can borrow are no good. Now he's getting 0% because he's lending a stock or he's creating bonds out of it. What these guys are saying here when they talk about efficient growth trajectory is they can buy cheap Bitcoin. They can buy it when it's down and when it's up. That's what MicroStrategy can't do anymore. They can't buy cheap Bitcoin. They have to buy expensive Bitcoin. They get better terms and more money when they buy the expensive Bitcoin. The cheap Bitcoin is not available because it's just they don't have the cash.
Quote, I'll be buying the top forever. So I guess more context there from Saylor.
Yeah, that's what he means. I'll be buying the top forever. He doesn't have a choice anymore.
So we got, as a perfect purpose-built platform for Bitcoin investors, 21 will be guided by Bitcoin-specific KPIs, including BPS and BPR, which we talked about there. So nothing totally new there. Here we have a Bitcoin for corporations, kind of breaking it down, sort of the initial allocation. But let's go back to the deck here. Terms of the transaction, interesting that 21 will be under the ticker symbol XX1, a little Bitcoin themed nod there. On the ticker symbol side, a bit about the valuation for the share price and how it's kind of come to valuing the company at $3 billion under its current form. And then here we finally have kind of the advisors at the end and a sort of kind of summative about 21, talking about pursuing Bitcoin accumulation, monetization, and Bitcoin literacy. So all interesting stuff there, but that probably closes the book on our deep dive into the actual folio of the literature. But yeah, I mean, look, I think that does this position the Bitcoin for corporations model, in your view, Nolan, as the definitive? This is the tip of the spear for this cycle, right? In the way that we kind of see maybe last time around in 2020 and 2021. Debanking and sort of Bitcoin as a savings, Bitcoin as a, sort of inflation hedge. That was really kind of the main narrative. It seems now we've seen a lot of narrative competition. You and I have seen a lot of kind of things coming over the last couple of years during the bear market. We've seen things like Bitcoin technology with ordinals. We've seen different ideas for, how to advance adoption with layer twos. Do you think Bitcoin corporate allocation is going to dominate this cycle now that we have Jack Mallers formally now trying to copycat MicroStrategy?
Yeah, but for different reasons, I think the original reasons that we liked about Bitcoin and corporate adoption, being able to traverse economic change, economic systemic change. The thing with the MicroStrategy one is that it was more just like, look how cheap they can get money and they can buy Bitcoin with it. Look how cheap money is to them and they can buy Bitcoin with it. So it became more of this thing where I can borrow cheap money, but I can buy Bitcoin with it. But that sort of had a ceiling. What these guys are presenting here seems like a more obvious strategy to the one we realized years ago.
Why would they have more access to raising capital than Michael Saylor? I don't quite understand that.
They have cash flow in their businesses. So the businesses that like Tether having cash flow means they don't have to borrow money. They don't have to borrow anything.
As in Tether a separate company, you're saying that Tether would invest the money into 21. Yeah. 21 would purchase the Bitcoin on their behalf.
Yeah, exactly. In the same way that, because Tether doesn't really know what to do with its money right now, right? It buys T-bills and it's like, because they make $1 billion a month and there's 50 people who work there, right? They literally profit $1 billion a month. So they're building a tower in El Salvador. How many more towers can they build? Right? Are they going to build like skyscrapers?
Well, I mean, Kelly did say he was going to build a Bitcoin city. And
you only got the Bitcoin city, but it's an AI city now. You didn't get the memo. So the cash flow that can come into these companies, the cash flow that SoftBank, when they say they have all these companies that are involved with SoftBank, they have cell companies. People with like regular subscription bills. They have a lot of cash flow that comes in and out of the business. It's not just the typical venture capitalist business. I don't know how the balance sheet is set up, but what I mean is the structures underneath this 21 have all the capacity to get cash flow in, and then they have another central bank that they can go borrow from. So Michael Saylor can't go to Japan and ask for money. Metaplanet does, sure, they get the cheap money in Japan, but that's just one tiny little company. These guys here are going to be bringing all of those resources, all that connection to Japan, and then bring it back to what I said earlier about this trade war. This is modeling to the world how they think the trade war is going to play out. And they're treating Bitcoin as a safe harbor. They're treating Bitcoin as an organizing asset. They're organizing this company around Bitcoin. MicroStrategy bought Bitcoin and then slowly started to organize the company around Bitcoin. They took on a lot of debt. It wasn't really necessarily the model to follow.
You can now earn real yield on your Bitcoin by simply holding it. The Core blockchain, Bitcoin's leading scaling solution, rewards you for keeping your Bitcoin right where it is. Here's how it works. Core is secured by a group of validators. When you lock up your BTC using Bitcoin's native time lock, you help elect validators to secure the Core network. In return, your validator earns rewards and passes them back to you. While time locked, your Bitcoin never leaves your wallets. No bridging, no lending, no counterparties. When the time lock expires, you get it back, completely untouched. Still your keys, still your coins, now your yield. Want to earn even more? Lock up core tokens along with your BTC to unlock higher yields through dual staking. Learn more and get started at stake.coredao.org/blockworks. For the past decade, Ledger has been the global leader in digital asset security, trusted to secure more than 20% of the world's crypto assets. Celebrating 10 years of innovation, Ledger is making digital ownership more secure and accessible with their latest products, Ledger Stacks and Ledger Flex. These wallets feature the world's first secure touchscreens, simplifying your digital transactions while ensuring uncompromising security through Ledger's secure chip and proprietary OS. Plus, with the Ledger Security Key app, you can say goodbye to traditional passwords and step up your digital protection. Ready to protect your assets? Choose the most trusted name in hardware wallets, Ledger, and take control of your digital security today at ledger.com.
There's a lot of discontent out there in the community. You see it in the comment section, you see it on Noster and things like that of, and Jack Mallers was really emblematic of this, right? He was emblematic of the 2021-20 era of, Bitcoin is going to help the world. We're going to go to kind of third world developing regions. We're going to bring technology to them. We're going to improve their daily lives, things like El Salvador. It really does feel like with Jack specifically now moving over to this company and really taking on a role like Michael Saylor. I mean, it's a huge kind of shift in the balance of power within the different, sects of Bitcoin, right? I would have thought that Jack Mallers, positioned him more as someone like a Jack Dorsey, right? Who, his company owns and is buying Bitcoin. But his primary focus is on bringing Bitcoin to the developed world. He said so personally. This does feel like a defection in the camps. Obviously, this is unspoken, right? This is a little bit of reading the tea leaves, but this is someone who was associated with a type of culture that does feel like it's under threat within Bitcoin. I see it, every day of, okay, why are you, tweeting this news? Why celebrate this when we used to celebrate these other aspects of Bitcoin? And it does feel like Jack is going to be an emotional shift over to him, really kind of evangelizing to a Wall Street crowd.
I bucket this as the paths to hyper-Bitcoinization, right? There's different routes. I never really believed, although I went along with it, this idea that we could get a bunch of plebs all holding a bit of Bitcoin in a wallet, and suddenly we would have this like power in numbers and the market would have to shift to us. So that's kind of what you're saying, this like, independent, decentralized, everyone in Bitcoin is a peer and we all have exited the system. We've all placed our votes to exit the system and we're holding Bitcoin to create something new. That seemed like a plausible way to get to hyper-Bitcoinization. And I think it is the end road of hyper-Bitcoinization is that eventually we'll get there.
COVID market has a different flavor.
Well, that's what I mean. So COVID taught me something in particular. It taught me that some of these sludge people are never going to turn to Bitcoin. They're just going to keep listening to orders and demands. It sort of was a bit of a black pill in the sense that you watched people get prompt engineered during COVID. You watched people start to follow the orders that were given to them and the talking points that were given to them. And you're seeing that become extreme now. It's become sort of extreme. And when that happened, personally, I said, well, the way we're going to go forward, there's kind of a fork in the road of humanity almost. Like we've separated from, you've got this where you get information from, where you build your worldview from. There's still people out there. Some people even watch that Elizabeth Warren podcast that everyone's laughing about, where she can't answer a question 2 days ago and can't speak authentically and can't sit there for an interview for the life of her. And she was the one going on a war against crypto and Bitcoin, if you remember. But here's the thing, when I see the avenue forward now, and some people can disagree, some people can agree, it's just what I think. It's not what I like, it's not what I chose, it's just what I'm seeing and what I think is happening. It looks like hyper-Bitcoinization is going to go through rich people. So rich people saying,
right, this is the end of, maybe I'll say this, is this the end of fair trade Bitcoin, right? This idea that there would be kind of a coffee shop sort of, grassroots, like awareness, like, countercultural awareness.
Yeah. That's over. But basically hyper-Bitcoinization to me now goes through two important markets in the world. Two markets that we saw were very important with COVID. The wealthy people, right? Just wealthy people measuring their money, measuring wealth by how much Bitcoin you have, psychologically measuring wealth, not by US dollar holdings, but by how much Bitcoin you have, is a big part of the story. And the other one, and this is what we're built on at Roxen, this is what we're anticipating. And Roxham, we don't think of ourselves as a 2024 market company. We're here for the 2024 market. Our big growth, we think, happens at the next market when we actually are able to create oil and energy for Bitcoin markets. We're able to measure energy in Bitcoin so that the price of oil is only really understandable in terms of
But
Bitcoin.
maybe let's say this another way, right? There's this idea, I think, that some people might look at Jack Mallers taking this job as CEO, right? And they might say, is this the best use of a Jack Mallers skill set, right? This is someone who, shocked the world when he was zapping, sats from his bedroom, to Africa and back in seconds, right? He was doing this on national TV. Is the best use of his time to have a U.S. public capital vehicle accumulate Bitcoin when we already have strategy doing this evangelization, when he is a prodigious tech founder in his own right, as you've elucidated?
Yeah, I think there's no fighting against this current. I think hyper Bitcoinization is happening before our eyes. And all that time we enjoyed, what you called the fair trade Bitcoin time, the time when retail had the jump on the sophisticated Wall Street person, that is over. I think we're ending that era. Now, the quickest point to getting Bitcoin into the hands of everyone in Africa and all that is to create hyper Bitcoinization and those conditions where then it's not even about evangelism. The system has flipped and turned and people will have to go out and get Bitcoin like everybody else. You're not going to get the discount of Bitcoin being this weird tech stock that like what Arthur Hayes was saying, some tech beta thing. It's becoming the actual measuring stick of the economy. It's becoming the actual market for energy. And so I don't think we have a choice but to go through Wall Street right now. These peers are valuable to us, and it is a peer-to-peer network. Not all peers are equal. Not all peers have ever been equal in Bitcoin. I think we know that, right? This myth that everyone who uses Bitcoin is just a peer is insane. And if you go back to the old people who were there from the beginning, if you don't run this type of Bitcoin, you're not really a peer. If you don't self-custody your Bitcoin, you're not a peer. So being a peer in Bitcoin isn't just you can't self-identify. You're either participating in the network or you aren't. You're either measuring your world against Bitcoin or you're not.
Right, but this does create more of a structure, right? The criticism of strategy was always, essentially, this, and I've said this before, at the end of the day, all MicroStrategy is a large Coinbase account, right? So to the network of Bitcoin, of the network of the people running nodes, actually running the software, actually putting their time and wealth into Bitcoin. I like the analogy because I think it sort of gets at to what people don't like about MicroStrategy, which is at the end of the day, this pool of Bitcoin doesn't even really live on the network, right?
No.
It's just really sitting in some corporation's balance sheet. And really, I think what we do want is to build native capital structure type things on Bitcoin, or we want the network itself to develop. And this seems like it's taking Jack's time away from the network to something that is really just increasing demand for Bitcoin, which, obviously is great, but it's away from the core technical infrastructure, which he seems so familiar and to have such an acumen with.
But, we are entering what I call, we've talked about on the show many times, bimetallism, right? The dollar is still going to exist. There is still going to be a dollar for Bitcoin market for a while now before everyone moves to full Bitcoin and we have a complete reversion to that. So if he's going to the tip of the spear, like you said, the actual tip of the spear, because that's where the action is. The action is on Wall Street. This is the main battleground right now of Bitcoin. The main human capital that we're transforming are the Wall Street people and the energy traders. That's why it's such a big deal, Bitcoin in Texas and New York. Now, the New York rules don't make any sense, but the actual participants in New York City are real, right? Whoever says New York's a Bitcoin backwater hasn't been around PubKey and hasn't been around the Wall Street.
No, it's been a tremendous revival.
It's a tremendous thing, right? It's one of the great Bitcoin capitals of the whole world. And so you've got to understand these two constituencies, the wealthy Wall Street people and the energy barons of Texas, are the most powerful forces Bitcoin can add to its global conquest, to its hyper Bitcoinization mission, and they get the job done. So you still have to get to all those Bitcoin native tools. That's why I think the idea of a technologist here is best, because you can't stop the next station on this train. No one can stop this train. And the next station for the train is Wall Street and Texas, the energy markets and Wall Street and the financial markets. So understanding that, knowing where that's going, like Jack is, I think I used an analogy once. We're not just trying to skate where the puck is going. We're trying to literally teleport to another sport where the ball is going to reappear in some quantum state. This is a very tricky thing we're doing, changing the global financial system. And so Jack Mallers doing this is merely just identifying the venue of hyper-Bitcoinization as it approaches, the station for hyper-Bitcoinization. After that, all bets are back on about how to get Bitcoin into every pleb's wallet in the world. But I'd say that the forces motivating COVID and that market up to 2021, we've learned a lot since then. And
I just wanted to get to I think the emotional core for people of what, it means to Bitcoiners to maybe be reacting to this in real time. Obviously Jack Mallers, we've got his X account up here where, he has not kind of given a message yet about this news, right? I think that's also something interesting that's coloring this, right? Is we're not hearing from Jack himself when really that's been a big part of Jack's relationship with the Bitcoin community, right? He has his own podcast now that he's been quite, nice retweet for me there. Nice. Thanks, Jack. In terms of, being that face of adoption. But I was trying to draw the emotional context of, I do think that, me and you talk a lot about Bitcoin market cycles. We talk a lot about how the different cycles look very different, right? There ends up being a different look and cultural feel. I think we've passed out of the phase where there's a competition for that. And we're entering, as you said, kind of this bull market will have a very different texture and feel, governments, corporates, Wall Street. And I think Jack moving to this vortex, it just caps it all off. It just feels like, this is where the bets are going. This is what this cycle is going to bring. And then I think there's the meta of, okay, well, what can this cycle really achieve? I think you're talking about this bringing a different level of capital and participants into Bitcoin. Something that I'll throw out there, because it was always one of my observations about what I think MicroStrategy and Michael Saylor really figured out, is that essentially retail, their fixation on the crypto market was really about interesting tickers and different unit biases. And I think the interesting thing as we're seeing all these companies come and start stacking Bitcoin is essentially you have something that looks like the crypto market, but that is all just Bitcoin backed, right? So you have all these exotic stock tickers that trade at different prices. We're seeing other cryptocurrencies now try to mirror this and mimic this with Janover and the Solana types, where they're just kind of following what Bitcoiners are doing. But, the end result kind of looks like the stock market being backed by Bitcoin in this kind of weird reverse proxy way, right? And I thought that, I think I said this to you in November around the time we were talking about the elections and everything. And I said, I think what's really interesting about Saylor's vision is that he's found a way to make Bitcoin systematically important to the stock market, which makes Bitcoin systematically important politically. And if that really caught on, just how impactful that could be. And I think that's this cycle's narrative we're going to see a lot of contention on, is can that happen? And if it does happen, if you really do get a significant number of players in the conventional stock market to buy into this, what does it look like when there is a correction in the Bitcoin price? As we all know,
systemically important by them, man. If a correction in the it's net worths of countries going down at that point.
Yeah, and I think that'll be very interesting. But all this is to say, I think maybe turning the page, it does feel like this cycle is going to be increasingly about corporate adoption, government adoption, and the people who had more of a technical view on developing Bitcoin, they'll still soldier on, but it does feel like they won't be the focus this time around. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think that experience we had over those years. I mean, we've already talked about this a bit. Just there's not necessarily, it's like human capital into the industry, right? You had the cryptographers, the Wall Street people did come, but it was like the people way out on the risk curve that showed up first, that just wanted to fucking gamble. And
I mean, nobody else would employ me.
Nobody else. Yeah. But it's like we talked about. Now we're getting to the world where indeed it is the Wall Streets, but it's the normal people who participate in Wall Street coming in. And just like we said, we've done events for years. We love the Bitcoin events, and we were just talking about it in DC a couple of weeks ago, that this might be the last time where our industry even gets together to have our own events that are separate from just like Wall Street events, or there's no internet conference anymore. There's no internet cafe anymore. It's a cafe and they have Wi-Fi. That's every cafe. If a cafe doesn't have Wi-Fi, you're going to be like, what are you doing here, right? So it's that aspect that the thing we knew, the thing we enjoyed as early Bitcoiners, and we had our own little, no one cared about us, we were off on our own. You know, I'll never forget what downtown Josh Brown, if you remember that Wall Street
Oh yeah,
guy who showed up, right?
when we were on
He
him.
gave us advice in 2017, and he says, you know, I'm around rich people all the time. I've seen this many times, and you know what's interesting. You know, we understand from lotteries about when people are happy with money, and he says the time when people are happiest is when they found out they won the lottery, and the time they cashed the ticket in. It's that period. The minute they cash the ticket in, the happiness comes down. And he said, what I remark about you Bitcoin guys, and he said this already in 2017, I would say it's continued up until now, is that you have a winning lottery ticket. You know it, but the rest of the world hasn't acknowledged it. So you get to live in this happy period before anyone is asking you for stuff and, you know, being disappointed in you because you can't give them money or whatever it is. Whatever adds to the frustration and disappointment of people who win the lottery and takes away from their happiness. That whole formula, it looks like, is that people know that we have a lottery ticket, we won, we did great, and that thing that we experienced for years, just being left alone, sometimes being an underdog and criticized, we love that stuff, right? It was so much fun, right? You stupid Bitcoiners, and then we win again, and it's always funny. That whole thing looks like it is going to be done. We're not going to be it's like the Boston Red Sox. Remember when they never won a World Series and they were terrible, and then, you know, and then suddenly they're winning all the time, and it's like that's a different fandom, right? What the Red Sox went through.
And you're talking about a formative experience in my life.
You got it. So this is the 2004 World Series for Boston right now for Bitcoin, and
well, I think we still got to steal second base.
We still got to steal. Yeah. We're not. Yeah. I don't want to make it sound like we still got to price oil. We still got to win Wall Street, and that's going to be a hard thing to do. So yeah, we're in this potentially world-changing scenario, and the whole experience of being a Bitcoiner won't be the same.
Well, certainly it'll be interesting to see what happens. A $3 billion company materializing from nothing, being led by a tech phenom, one of the industry's best and brightest. It doesn't happen every day. Nolan Bowerly, thanks for joining me. We will see you next time in New York, hopefully for permissionless this June, the 24th to the 26th. We'll be bringing Bitcoin builders together and developers together with some additional context colored by Bitcoin's maturation around the globe. Of course, I'll be announcing some speakers and special guests coming up soon.
Let's get Jack Mallers. Let's get 21. We got to get them. We got to get them.
Some crypto developers would love it. Nolan, where can people find you before we go to break?
You can find me at Count BTC on Twitter. You can find me at Roxham TV. We do a morning show every day, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. called The Great Awakening. We have a look at media. We talk about this story. We talk about all this stuff. It's a lot of fun. Come hang out. We do comments. It's a bit of talk radio, right? We like to do a bit of a talk radio thing. I've got a new show coming out real soon called The Golden Age, and we're going to be charting the ability of Bitcoiners to build these citadels we all talk about and delivering a golden age for humanity. You can also catch me on the Breakup Canada edition. I've been charting Bitcoin through Canada and the Canadian elections with Brad Mills and Dave Bradley, two great Bitcoiners. We do that every Friday. We'll be doing an election watch party, and the Canadian elections are on Monday, and we'll be doing a watch party for that on Monday on Roxham TV. So come join us. That's where you can catch me.
Fun stuff. Always nice to see people who care about the Canadian election out there alive and well. You can like, of course, this podcast, smash that like and subscribe. If you're on Twitter, give us a retweet and a like. Again, we'll see you at Permissionless in June. This has been Supply Shock, a Blockworks podcast.